Power isn't built on perfection. It's built on precision, on the ability to lose the right things at the right time for the right reason. That's the secret most people never grasp. They believe that power means winning every battle. That strength is proven through dominance, through the refusal to yield. But Machiavelli saw through this illusion centuries ago. He realized that those who chase constant victory end up exhausting their resources, revealing their tactics, and exposing their limits. A man who must always win cannot hide, and a ruler who cannot hide will eventually lose. The world doesn't reward the one who never falls. It rewards the one who falls intentionally, quietly, in a way that leads others to believe he's weaker than he really is. Machiavelli understood the paradox of power. Sometimes, you have to let yourself lose a little to win everything. He called this idea, in essence, the art of strategic surrender. Not the surrender of a coward, but the surrender of a chess master who sacrifices a piece to set up a checkmate 5 moves later. When you look at life through that lens, everything changes. Every argument, every setback, every betrayal becomes a potential weapon, not because you wanted it, but because you know how to use it. Machiavelli's brilliance was never in brute strength. It was in his timing. He knew that most people confuse resistance with power. They think saying no all the time makes them strong. But the strongest players know when to say yes. They know when to step back, when to retreat, and when to appear defeated, because they understand that the enemy will always overextend when they believe they've already won. There's something profoundly psychological about this. Machiavelli wasn't talking about wars fought with swords. He was talking about the silent wars of perception, the wars fought in boardrooms, in politics, in relationships, even within your own mind. The people who master those wars aren't the ones who keep attacking. They're the ones who can make losing look like a choice. Think about that for a second. The difference between humiliation and power is often just presentation. If you make your retreat look deliberate, you control the narrative. And whoever controls the narrative controls the field. We live in a time where surrender is seen as weakness, but Machiavelli would call that stupidity. He would tell you that real dominance isn't about crushing others at every turn. It's about creating situations where they unknowingly crush themselves. And the best way to do that? Let them believe they're winning. Let them get comfortable. Let them expand too far, talk too much, reveal too many of their moves. Because the moment someone believes they've already beaten you, they stop being careful. They stop watching their flanks. They stop hiding their intentions. And that's when you strike. Not with emotion, but with calculation. Machiavelli's genius lay in this slow-burn patience. He studied human nature long enough to realize that arrogance blinds faster than ambition. When a rival thinks you're harmless, they'll lower their guard faster than any act of aggression ever could. This is why he often wrote that appearances are more powerful than truth. Losing publicly can often strengthen you privately. It gives you time to rebuild, to replan, and most importantly, to watch, while your opponent celebrates too early. The mistake most people make is that they equate loss with identity. They think losing means they are a loser. But Machiavelli would scoff at that. To him, a loss is just an instrument, like a pawn in the hands of a strategist. It's expendable. The only thing that truly matters is positioning. And sometimes, the best position isn't forward, it's underneath. Beneath the radar, out of sight, hidden, but still aware. The people who never allow themselves to lose small end up losing big, because they never learn the rhythm of retreat. They fight every fight, and eventually, one of those fights costs them everything. There's a subtle kind of dominance that comes from restraint. Think about when you've been in a conversation where you could easily humiliate the other person, but you don't. You hold back. You let them believe they've won the point. That restraint isn't weakness. It's psychological positioning. Because they'll remember that moment not as victory, but as a strange kind of permission. You allowed them to win, and in doing so, you remain in control. They're now emotionally indebted to your silence, to your calmness. You've lost the small argument, but gained permanent leverage. That's strategic surrender in its purest form. Machiavelli believed that life constantly tests your ability to choose between ego and advantage. Ego wants to win immediately. Advantage wants to win permanently. And the two are almost always at odds. The man who can surrender his ego without surrendering his goal becomes unstoppable, because he's unpredictable. You can't manipulate someone who doesn't need validation. You can't corner someone who isn't afraid to retreat. You can't destroy someone who can rebuild quietly. He once wrote that fortune favors the bold, but he didn't mean reckless courage. He meant the boldness to act when others freeze, to move when others panic, to adapt when others are too proud to. Every great leader he studied, whether they rose through cunning or cruelty, had one thing in common. They knew when to appear powerless. They knew how to make a loss look like a narrative twist, a setup, a misdirection. The battlefield of power is not symmetrical. It's psychological. Those who think in straight lines, win or lose, strong or weak, are dominant or submissive, are the ones who get played. The ones who think in circles, lose, observe, adapt, re-emerge, are the ones who last. And Machiavelli's entire philosophy was about lasting. He didn't care about temporary applause. He cared about permanence, influence that outlives the applause, control that doesn't need recognition. Strategic surrender isn't passive. It's active patience. It's not lying down. It's crouching before a leap. It's saying, I'll let you have this moment because I know the end belongs to me. It's an awareness of cycles, that sometimes the ground you give up today becomes the hill you conquer tomorrow. That retreating isn't the opposite of fighting. It's the continuation of it, in a smarter form. And this idea doesn't just apply to politics or warfare. It applies to personal life, to love, to business, to every space where control and chaos collide. Think of the person who always has to respond immediately, always has to correct, defend, explain. They burn out. They become predictable. But the person who can hold silence, who can take a small loss with composure, terrifies everyone. Because nobody knows what they're planning. Nobody knows if they're broken or just biding time. That ambiguity is power. Machiavelli knew that in the theater of human interaction, uncertainty is more powerful than aggression. When you start thinking like that, when you start asking, is this loss really a loss? You become dangerous. You stop reacting. You start designing. Every rejection becomes redirection. Every defeat becomes data. Every setback becomes camouflage. The crowd will mock you for appearing weak. Let them. They can't tell the difference between pain and preparation. But you can, and that's why, when you rise again, they won't even understand how you did it. To Machiavelli, control wasn't about being invincible. It was about being invisible until it mattered. His greatest students were those who could turn humiliation into a lesson plan, betrayal into blueprint, and loss into leverage. They were dangerous not because they never lost, but because they used every loss as fuel. They didn't fear looking foolish, because they knew appearances fade. Only outcomes endure, and the outcome belongs to the one who plays longer, not louder. That's what people miss when they try to imitate Machiavellian thinking. They copy the ruthlessness, but forget the rhythm of patience, the ability to let the world underestimate you so you can move freely, the courage to look weak so you can rebuild unseen. It's not about pretending. It's about precision, about knowing exactly what to lose, when to lose it, and why. And when that moment comes, when you finally strike, it won't even look like revenge. It'll look like destiny. That's the trap Machiavelli always watched for. The moment when power becomes predictable. When you react the same way to every attack, you stop being dangerous. You become legible. And legibility kills control. The real masters of power, the ones who use strategic surrender, don't follow a fixed rhythm. Sometimes they advance like a storm. Other times, they retreat so completely it makes their enemies paranoid. Their unpredictability is the weapon. When people can't tell if your loss is real or staged, they never relax. They never sleep easy around you. And that tension keeps you in control even when you seem out of it. Machiavelli understood that winning isn't a linear journey. It's a psychological maze. Each decision changes how others perceive you. Every defeat can become a mirror that reflects your enemy's ego back at them. He knew how fragile confidence is in others. If he appeared to lose, he was actually studying how people behaved in victory, who gloated, who sympathized, who distanced themselves. Each reaction gave him a map of loyalty and weakness. That's why strategic surrender isn't just about manipulating the opponent. It's about gathering information. Every small loss becomes a field experiment in human nature. You can test this idea in daily life. The moment you stop fighting every accusation, every misunderstanding, something interesting happens. People reveal themselves. Some will double down, showing their hunger for dominance. Others will feel guilt and come closer. By withdrawing your defense, you force everyone else to play their real card. Machiavelli would call that the silent extraction of truth. You didn't need to interrogate anyone. You just needed to let them think they'd already won. This tactic thrives on time. Machiavelli's patience wasn't passive. It was strategic calculation stretched across years. He knew that impulsive victory is cheap. It fades the moment applause dies down. But long-game victories, the ones born from delayed gratification, restructure entire systems. That's why he admired those who could sit through humiliation without flinching. Because humiliation is only unbearable to those who seek approval. If you no longer need others to validate you, every insult becomes meaningless. That's where your strength quietly multiplies. He would often warn that people collapse not because they're weak, but because they demand too much respect too early. The powerful don't beg to be understood. They let misunderstanding work in their favor. When someone misjudges your motives, don't rush to correct them. Let them stay blind. Confusion is control. The more they assume, the more predictable they become. Machiavelli's entire philosophy can be condensed into that: don't reveal your full strength. Not through words, not through defense, not even through victory. If you want an example of how this works beyond theory, look at the concept of controlled loss in negotiation. A shrewd negotiator will intentionally concede minor points early, deadlines, tone, a few non-essential terms, to make the other side feel powerful. This false sense of progress disarms them. They stop analyzing, stop guarding their true positions, and before they realize it, they've given away far more than they gained. The small losses create the illusion of fairness. That illusion is what Machiavelli weaponized again and again. Because fairness is a story you tell your enemy while you quietly move the goalposts. But there's another layer to strategic surrender, emotional warfare. Sometimes, yielding isn't about outcomes, it's about energy. The ability to absorb emotional blows without reaction. When someone tries to provoke you and you give them nothing, no anger, no justification, you starve them of fuel. They burn themselves out. Their need for control becomes visible. You've surrendered the argument, but gained dominance of the atmosphere. Machiavelli saw this as the art of inner disarmament, mastering your internal battlefield before you master the external one. It's why he believed appearances could be armor. If you look defeated but remain alert, nobody realizes you're studying the terrain. You're mapping their movements, anticipating their next strike, conserving your power while theirs drains away. The small loss becomes a disguise, and the disguise becomes your advantage. The people who chase constant victory never get this. They burn all their energy proving they're strong, while the silent observer stores his. There's a dark beauty in this kind of patience. It's not about waiting for karma or hoping for justice. It's about timing your moment so precisely that when you rise, no one can stop you. You don't rise with noise. You rise like a shadow reclaiming space it always owned. Every failure, every retreat, every overlooked step builds quiet momentum. And by the time others realize what's happening, you're already behind their defenses. Machiavelli's idea of the strategic loss isn't moral or emotional, it's mathematical. You give up 10% to gain 200%. You sacrifice short-term validation for long-term control. This is the opposite of how most people operate. Most people sell their future victories for present comfort. They need to be seen as right, immediately. They need to be admired, instantly. That's how they get trapped, not by others, but by their own impatience. Strategic surrender teaches you to invert that instinct, to see surrender not as an ending, but as an investment. You're trading ego for endurance. You're buying future options with present humility. You're betting that while others waste their energy celebrating small wins, you'll have the strength to seize the final one. And when you finally move, no one will see it coming, because they thought you were finished. That's the paradox Machiavelli loved most: to win by seeming to lose, to dominate by appearing powerless. But there's one more reason he valued small losses, something almost spiritual beneath the strategy. Losing deliberately keeps you flexible. Power without flexibility always breaks. When you win too often, you become rigid. You start believing your own myth. You forget how to adapt. And the moment conditions change, you crack under the weight of your own reputation. The person who knows how to lose small never fears change because they've practiced letting go. They've trained their mind to detach from control without losing clarity. That mental elasticity is what Machiavelli admired most. When you can absorb a loss without bitterness, something rare happens. Your mind stays strategic even in chaos. You're no longer acting out of panic or pride. You're acting out of purpose. Every blow you take, every failure you endure, refines your emotional armor. And soon enough, nothing surprises you. You start seeing patterns before others do. You can sense when someone's confidence is about to collapse, or when their ambition is turning into arrogance. You become the quiet architect of events, the one who knows that even a broken piece has value in the right hands. That's the final layer of Machiavelli's strategic surrender, transformation, turning weakness into structure, turning pain into design, turning what others throw at you into something you can build with. He didn't preach avoidance of loss. He preached mastery over it. Because if you can command your own losses, you'll never truly be defeated. The world can take your position, your reputation, even your dignity. But if you still control how you interpret it, you remain free. And that freedom, that quiet psychological control, is the truest form of power there is. That's why Machiavelli's idea of surrender was never about submission. It was about steering the fall. Because when you fall on your own terms, you don't really fall. You redirect the momentum. Think of it like a martial artist who doesn't resist the strike, but turns it into part of his motion. He lets his opponent's force carry him, then converts it into a counterattack. That's what Machiavelli meant when he taught that yielding at the right time is the highest form of intelligence. You're not being overpowered, you're rebalancing the field. You're using the opponent's own energy to destroy their balance. He would say, let them think they've conquered you, and you'll own their confidence. Confidence blinds faster than arrogance ever could. When someone believes you're finished, they stop watching, they stop scheming, they grow careless, they overcommit, and that's when you return. Not with a loud revenge, but with quiet precision. The type of precision that looks inevitable in hindsight, like it was always meant to happen that way. There's something ruthless in that calm. Machiavelli didn't believe in luck, he believed in the illusion of it. The truly dangerous people in life are the ones who make their victories look like accidents, who make their timing look like coincidence. They let everyone think, he just got lucky. Because if people think you're lucky, they'll never study you seriously. They'll never prepare for you. They'll never realize that every inch you gave up was a map you'd already drawn. That's what small losses really are, maps. Each one teaches you how the world reacts to your vulnerability. You learn who comforts you, who distances themselves, who celebrates. You learn where loyalty ends and interest begins. You learn how much pain you can absorb before emotion clouds your judgment. These are things you can't learn from victory. Victory deceives you. It makes you think you understand the world, but it only shows you its surface. Loss, even a small one, reveals its architecture. It exposes what truly moves people: fear, envy, insecurity, admiration, guilt. When you've seen enough losses, you no longer chase them away. You start using them as mirrors. Machiavelli used to describe fortune as a river, unpredictable, violent, but not unstoppable. You can't fight the current. You can only anticipate its flow. That's how he approached setbacks. When fortune shifted against him, he didn't rage at it. He studied it. He watched which direction it was pushing him, and then he turned that direction into advantage. Most people drown trying to push against the water, but those who bend with it, who understand when to surrender to its force, eventually control where it leads. That's how wars are won, not through constant aggression, but through rhythm, advancing and withdrawing with purpose. Small losses are part of that rhythm. They make you unpredictable, fluid, adaptable. They remind your enemies that you're not playing the same game they are. You're not chasing the next victory, you're shaping the entire war. A general who wins every battle may still lose the campaign, but a general who knows when to lose a skirmish to protect his long-term position, that's the one history remembers. This principle applies everywhere, in relationships, in business, in any form of power. Imagine you're negotiating, and someone undercuts you. The instinct is to retaliate, to assert dominance immediately. But what happens if instead you smash them out, step back, and let them overreach? They'll mistake your calm for defeat. They'll press harder. They'll expose their limits. And by the time they realize you are never competing on their timeline, you'll already be in control of the terms. That's the kind of cold patience Machiavelli respected more than brute cleverness. Because cleverness wins applause. Patience wins empires. He believed that most people destroy their own opportunities because they can't stomach temporary weakness. They're so addicted to appearing strong that they sabotage the very foundation of their power. It's a kind of ego suicide, dying for the sake of looking alive. Strategic surrender breaks that pattern. It lets you play the longer game. You can retreat, regroup, rebuild without humiliation, because you understand that optics don't matter if outcomes are yours. And here's where the tactic becomes truly psychological. When others see you take a loss calmly, it unsettles them. They can't process composure in defeat. It violates their mental script. They expect panic, denial, anger, something. But when you give them silence, they begin to doubt the meaning of their own victory. Why isn't he reacting? Did I miss something? That doubt spreads faster than fear. It turns your opponent's victory into anxiety. You've just inverted the emotional battlefield and you didn't even move. Strategic surrender is the art of redirecting emotion. You take their aggression and turn it inward. You let them drown in their own overconfidence while you plan in stillness. That's why Machiavelli said it's better to appear foolish than to be foolish. Appear weak, and you'll gather information. Pretend to retreat, and you'll gain perspective. Real power isn't in showing that you can win. It's in knowing exactly when to look like you've lost. There's also a subtler reward hidden inside this approach: control over yourself. When you stop reacting to every small loss, every insult, every temporary disadvantage, your mind clears. You realize how much energy you've wasted defending things that never mattered. And once you stop bleeding energy into meaningless battles, you start seeing the real ones. You start choosing them. That's when you become selective, surgical. That's when power stops being something you chase and starts being something you design. Because in truth, most people don't lose because others outsmart them. They lose because they fight on too many fronts at once. They want to win everything. Every debate, every interaction, every impression. Machiavelli knew this hunger was fatal. The man who needs to be seen as invincible spends his whole life defending illusions. But the man who allows himself to appear beaten, while quietly building, becomes untouchable. In the end, Machiavelli's strategic surrender isn't about pretending. It's about mastery of tempo, knowing when to act and when to vanish, when to strike and when to let the noise consume itself. He knew that the world's greatest victories are quiet. They happen not in the heat of confrontation, but in the cold patience that follows. Because when you learn to lose small, you never lose big. You bend with the storm, you study its wind, and one day you rise again. Not because fortune favored you, but because you understood how to dance with it when everyone else tried to fight it.